The air in the desolate world was thick with darkness, and the landscape seemed endless, void of life. The once thriving city had now turned into a haunting ruin, its tall, jagged walls crumbling under the weight of time. The sky above was a dull gray with no stars, no moon, only the shadows of distant, towering figures moving across the land. This was a place where light never reached, where death lingered in every corner. It was the kind of world where hope was a forgotten word. At the heart of this barren wasteland, on the cold, rough ground, lay the alien vampire girl. Once a fierce warrior, a creature of unimaginable strength. And yet now, she was nothing more than a dying, helpless soul. Her skin, pale as the moon's light, was covered in wounds, each one more gruesome than the last. Blood seeped from the gashes in her body, staining the dirt beneath her. Her long silver hair, once flowing like a river of light, now clung to her face in matted strands drenched in sweat and blood. The once fierce glow in her blue eyes had dimmed, leaving them glassy, lifeless, staring into the vast, empty darkness. Her body trembled with each breath she took, but it was clear that the life within her was slowly fading away. Her strength was nearly gone, and with every heartbeat her grip on life seemed to loosen. She had fought many battles before, battles that left scars both on her body and her soul, but none had ever brought her to this point. She had been left behind, abandoned in a place where even her alien nature could not protect her. Her enemies had struck swiftly with precision, and they had left her for dead, believing her to be no more than a fading memory. The pain in her body was overwhelming, yet it was not the pain that weighed on her heart. No, it was the realization that she was utterly alone. No one would come to save her. She had no allies left. The last remnants of her strength were slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The world had forgotten her, and she had no choice but to surrender to the darkness. Her mind drifted to memories of her past, her family, her battles, the life she once had. But even those memories felt distant now. They were slipping away as quickly as her consciousness. Her breathing became shallow, her chest rising and falling with effort, and with each breath she felt herself sinking deeper into the abyss. She could feel the coldness of death wrapping around her, and yet she couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could hold on. She had faced death many times, but never like this. Never alone. And just as she thought the end had come, something changed. A faint sound reached her ears. Soft, almost imperceptible. But it was there. Footsteps. At first she thought it was just a hallucination, a cruel trick of her fading mind. But the sound grew louder, closer. She struggled to focus, to lift her head from the cold stone, but her body betrayed her, refusing to move. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she thought she might slip into unconsciousness, but then the footsteps stopped. A figure emerged from the shadows. The alien vampire girl's heart skipped a beat, and her breath hitched. She couldn't make out the figure clearly, but she could sense something human. She could feel the warmth of this presence, a stark contrast to the coldness around her. Her eyes, barely able to focus, tried to latch onto the figure, but everything was blurry. Was it a mirage? Was this some trick of her failing mind? But no, it was real. The figure moved closer, and as it did, the girl felt an unfamiliar sense of hope stir within her. She had been abandoned, left to perish in this forsaken world, but now someone was here. Someone was coming for her. She tried to call out, but her voice failed her, a mere whisper lost in the wind. The figure knelt beside her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a human presence. Warm, solid, real. The man. She could tell now it was a man, his silhouette framed by the faint light of the distant torches, touched her shoulder gently, and his voice, though soft, carried a tone of determination. "You're not alone," he said. The words a promise that seemed impossible yet undeniable. "I'm not going to let you die here." The alien vampire girl's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to comprehend what was happening. She was dying. She was supposed to die here, abandoned and forgotten. Yet here was this stranger, this human, telling her she wasn't alone. The promise hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. She closed her eyes just for a moment, and when she opened them again, the human's face was above hers, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of compassion and resolve. The alien vampire girl's body felt heavy in the human's arms, and as he lifted her, a sense of urgency coursed through his veins. The pain she was in was evident, but there was something more than just her wounds that troubled him. It was the vulnerability in her eyes. He had expected fear, perhaps aggression, but instead, there was only quiet surrender. She had given up, and yet, here he was trying to save someone who had once been an unstoppable force. The concept of saving an alien, a vampire no less, was unfathomable. But there was something about her, something that called to him on a deeper level. Her blood-soaked armor glinted under the dim light of the torches scattered around the cave-like refuge where they had taken shelter. He had no idea how she had ended up here in the ruins of a long-forgotten world. The once mighty alien warrior, now fragile and helpless, was a far cry from the image he had in his mind. He had been trained to fight, to protect, but never had he thought he would be rescuing an alien vampire. The human ran a hand through his dark hair, trying to gather his thoughts. He had a mission to complete, but that mission had been interrupted by fate. The fact that he had found her, left to die, broken and alone, was not something he could simply ignore. His instincts told him to help, to save her, despite the danger that came with it. But everything inside him screamed to run. Alien vampires were dangerous creatures, filled with power, and yet there was something about her that didn't fit the typical mold. She wasn't a monster, not in the way he had imagined. As he settled her down on the stone floor of the shelter, his hands shook slightly. Her breathing was labored, each inhale a struggle, but she was alive. For now. He looked down at her, his mind racing with thoughts of how to help her. He wasn't a healer, he wasn't even sure what kind of medical attention an alien vampire required, but he had to try. The girl's blue eyes flickered open, and for a brief moment, she met his gaze. He saw the flicker of confusion, then something else, something resembling gratitude, though faint. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was too weak, too tired to form the sentences she needed. "Don't try to speak," he said softly, trying to calm her. "Rest for now, you're safe." But as he said the words, he wasn't sure if he believed them himself. How could he promise her safety in a world like this? How could he protect her from the horrors that were bound to follow them? He stood up and paced for a moment, his eyes darting back to her fragile form. There was a gnawing feeling in his gut that he couldn't shake. The alien vampires weren't a myth. They were real, and they were terrifying. Yet there was no malice in the girl's eyes. She wasn't like the others, and he couldn't help but wonder why. He had heard stories of her kind, violent, ruthless creatures who preyed on the weak, creatures that had wiped out entire colonies. But here she was, barely hanging on, and for some reason it made no sense to him. His hand instinctively moved to the weapon at his side, a blade forged for combat, something meant to protect him from any threat. He glanced at it, then back, at her. She was no threat, at least not right now. As the silence settled between them, the alien vampire girl shifted slightly, letting out a weak groan. Her eyes met his again, this time with more clarity. There was a sense of recognition in her gaze, but it wasn't fear. It was curiosity. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice raspy and barely audible. The words were shaky, but they hung in the air like a promise. She wasn't used to weakness, to being in a position where she needed saving, yet here she was, depending on this human. He didn't answer right away, unsure of what to say. What was he supposed to tell her? That he had no idea why he had helped her, why he hadn't just left her to die as the world seemed to expect. He had no answer, only the undeniable feeling that something deeper was at play. "Why?" she whispered, her voice a little stronger now, though still fragile. "Why would you save me? I'm nothing but a monster." Her words hit him harder than he expected. A monster. Was that what she thought she was? He had heard the stories, the rumors about alien vampires. They were creatures of darkness, predators that devoured anything and anyone who got in their way. Yet standing here in front of him, she didn't look like a monster. She looked like someone who had been broken, abandoned, and left to die. "Because I couldn't let you die alone," he replied simply, his voice steady, but filled with something unspoken. "I couldn't just walk away and pretend it didn't matter." The alien vampire girl stared at him, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she was trying to make sense of his words. Perhaps like him, she didn't understand why he was doing this, but there was something in her heart, something that made her believe in his sincerity. A soft breeze stirred the air around them, and for a moment, the girl's tense expression softened. She closed her eyes, letting out a sigh that seemed to release a fraction of the weight she had been carrying for so long. She was no longer the warrior who had torn through battles with unyielding strength. She was just a girl, a broken soul searching for solace. The human sat beside her, watching her closely. There was no going back now. He had crossed a line, made a choice that could cost him everything, but in that moment he knew one thing for sure. He would protect her no matter the cost. The silence stretched between them, heavy with meaning. But in that silence was something else, something that neither of them could yet name, but both felt deep within their hearts. It was the beginning of something neither of them had ever expected. A journey they would take together, one that would change everything. The silence in the dimly lit shelter was broken only by the soft crackling of a fire that flickered weakly in the corner. The human's eyes stayed fixed on the alien vampire girl, whose breathing had steadied for the moment. But the tension between them remained. They both knew that they were far from safe. Even though he had saved her life, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't face an even greater danger soon. The world they were in was filled with hidden threats, ones that neither of them could predict. Her wounds had begun to heal, her alien blood regenerating at an astonishing rate. She was strong, far stronger than any human, yet the signs of her exhaustion were still visible in the way her body trembled. She couldn't fight in her current state, but the human couldn't help but feel that the calmness of the moment was merely the eye of the storm. The danger hadn't passed yet. It was just waiting, lurking in the shadows. The human knew that the girl wasn't telling him everything. She had spoken of being a monster, but the true extent of her past remained a mystery. Why was she here? Why had she been left to die? The alien vampire girl had a history, one of bloodshed, one that might have brought her here, to this forsaken place. But that wasn't something she was ready to share just yet. He had to earn her trust first. As the girl slowly sat up, her eyes met his, and for the first time since he had found her, he saw a flicker of something. Regret, perhaps, or a deep sadness she was trying to suppress. But even as she opened her mouth to speak, a sudden noise outside shattered the moment. A loud metallic scrape echoed from the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. The human immediately stiffened, his hand instinctively moving to the blade at his side. He could feel it. Something was wrong. The air had changed. The sense of peace that had briefly settled between them was now replaced with an overwhelming sense of danger. The girl's eyes widened, and she reached for him with a sudden urgency. "They're here," she whispered, her voice hoarse but filled with a dangerous certainty. "They found us." Before the human could react, the ground beneath them trembled, and the walls of the shelter seemed to shudder as something heavy approached. The air was thick with the scent of metal and decay, and a low, ominous hum filled the air. The girl stood with surprising speed, her eyes flashing with a predatory intensity. "They're not here for you," she said, her voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. "But they will kill you if they find you. You need to leave." He stepped forward, grabbing her by the arm before she could move. "I'm not going anywhere without you," he said firmly, though a knot of fear had begun to form in his stomach. "Who are they?" Her expression hardened as she pulled her arm away from him. "They are my past, human. You don't need to know who they are, but they won't stop until they've destroyed me, and anyone who helps me." Her words were a dagger to his chest. He had no idea what kind of enemies could instill this level of fear in her, but he couldn't back down. Now, he had made a promise, and no matter the cost, he would stand by her. They had already been through too much to turn back now. The sounds outside grew louder, and the walls creaked under the pressure. There was no time left. They were coming. "Stay close," the human said, his voice low. He knew they didn't have much time. Grabbing the girl by the wrist, he pulled her toward the back of the shelter, away from the entrance. He didn't know where they would go next, but he was determined to get them out of there. They moved swiftly through the darkened shelter, their steps muffled against the cold stone. The girl was silent, her body tensed with anticipation. The human couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted, that every movement they made was being watched. The air around them seemed to thicken, and an unsettling sense of dread hung in the shadows. Just as they reached a narrow corridor, leading deeper into the shelter, a loud crash echoed from behind them. The entrance had been breached. The human didn't need to look back to know what was coming. He could feel it. The girl had stopped moving, her eyes fixed on the door, and the human could see the faintest shimmer of fear in her expression. "They're here," she whispered again. But this time there was something different in her voice, something darker. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of what was coming. From the shadows, figures emerged, tall, armored beings, their bodies cloaked in dark metallic suits. Their eyes glowed a dim red, and their movements were slow but deliberate. These weren't just enemies. They were hunters, methodical and merciless. The human instinctively stepped in front of the girl, his hand gripping his weapon, ready to defend her to the death. "They'll kill you too if you don't leave," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Go. I'll hold them off." "No," the human replied, his voice steady, though the fear in his chest threatened to rise. "I'm not leaving you." The figures stepped forward, their weapons drawn. One of them, a tall, imposing figure with a jagged sword, spoke in a language the human couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to end this. "You don't have to do this," the human said, raising his voice. "We can leave. Just let us go." The figure's cold, metallic gaze locked on him, and it raised its sword, its intent clear. "You will not leave. Neither of you will." And then, without warning, the battle began. The human fought with everything he had, but it was clear that they were outnumbered, outmatched. The alien vampire girl, though weakened, fought with a savage grace, her movements fluid and deadly. But even with her strength, she knew this battle was far from over. As the human parried a strike, he realized the truth. These weren't just enemies. These were the ghosts of the alien vampire girl's past, the ones she had been running from, and they wouldn't stop until she was dead. The battle had escalated into chaos. The human's body ached from the blows he had taken, his breath ragged, his grip on his weapon slipping with every passing moment. Despite his best efforts, he knew they couldn't hold off the enemy forever. The alien vampire girl, though powerful, was still weakened, her strength running low. Her once lightning-fast movements had slowed, and her breaths came in labored gasps. The odds of survival were growing slimmer by the second, yet neither of them was willing to give up. They fought side by side, each protecting the other in an unspoken promise. The girl moved like a shadow, her movements almost inhuman in their precision, striking down one of the attackers with a swift motion of her blade. But it wasn't enough. The enemies kept coming, relentless, a never-ending wave of cold, merciless figures. The human knew they needed to find a way out. Fast, but the only exit was blocked, and the enemy closed in from all sides. The girl's eyes flickered to him for a split second, and in that brief moment, their gazes locked. There was something silent between them, something that neither of them had fully acknowledged before now. It was the understanding that the fight they were in wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting each other at all costs. "We can't keep running," she gasped, her voice strained as she fought off another attacker. "They won't stop coming." "I'm not leaving you," he said, barely able to speak through the pain, his hand still clutching his weapon. even though his body was at the brink of collapse. "I promised." She gave him a look, one filled with something that resembled both regret and gratitude. Her blue eyes, once so full of fierce confidence, were now clouded with uncertainty. She had lived a long life, one full of battles and betrayal, and yet, here she was, dependent on a human of all beings, for survival. She had never asked for help, never trusted anyone. But this human, this stranger, had chosen to stand by her side when everyone else had left her to die. For the first time in centuries, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel: hope. But the reality of their situation was harsh. The numbers were against them. The human strength was fading, and the girl, though she could heal faster than any human, was still recovering from her injuries. Then, as if the universe itself had decided their fate, a loud crash echoed through the shelter, followed by the unmistakable sound of a larger force. A massive figure, towering over the rest, stepped into the room. A leader, a commander of the forces that had hunted them. This was no mere soldier. This was the one who had orchestrated her downfall, the one who had sworn to destroy her no matter the cost. His eyes, cold and merciless, met hers with an unyielding hatred. "You should have stayed dead," he sneered, his voice deep and menacing. The girl's heart pounded in her chest as she recognized him, the man who had been responsible for so much of her pain, the one who had taken everything from her. You were supposed to be dead," she spat, her voice filled with fury. The human who had been standing beside her knew instantly that this was the breaking point. This was the moment they either fought until the end or gave everything up in one final act of defiance. The girl's eyes filled with a quiet resignation. She had fought long enough. She had survived long enough, but now she understood the truth. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for him too. "I can't let him hurt you," the human said, his voice hoarse but resolute. He stepped forward, ready to face the towering figure. The blade in his hand felt like a weight far heavier than it should have been, but he wasn't going to back down now. Not when everything was on the line. The alien vampire girl reached out and grabbed his arm, stopping him. "No," she whispered, her voice urgent. "You don't understand. If you fight him now, he will kill you." The human turned to look at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Then what do we do?" Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, a rare sign of vulnerability from the creature who had once been invincible. "I'll give everything I have to protect you," she said, her voice shaking. "But I need you to promise me something. When it's over and when I'm gone, don't stop fighting. Don't let them win." The human didn't speak at first, the weight of her words sinking in. He wasn't sure what she meant by "when I'm gone," but he couldn't afford to lose her now. "I'm not leaving you," he said again, more fiercely than before. The girl's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "You have no choice." With those words, she turned back to face the enemy. The towering figure was already raising his weapon, a massive, jagged sword, ready to strike. But just as he was about to bring it down on them both, the girl stepped forward, her body glowing with a faint otherworldly light. She held up her hand, and an energy unlike anything the human had ever seen pulsed from her fingertips. It wasn't just her vampire powers. It was something else, something deeper, more primal. "Run!" she shouted, her voice carrying across the room. The human didn't question her. He turned and ran toward the narrow passage at the back of the shelter. He didn't look back. But as he sprinted through the dark, he heard the deafening sound of battle behind him. The clash of metal, the cries of pain, the final stand of a warrior who had fought her entire life, only to make the ultimate sacrifice. When he reached the exit, he stopped, breathless. He didn't want to leave her behind. He couldn't. But as the light of the shelter began to dim, he knew it was too late. He could only hope that her sacrifice would be enough, that her fight had bought them both the time they needed, and so the human was left to carry on without her, alone. But not truly alone, for her memory would fuel his resolve to keep fighting, to survive. The sound of her sacrifice echoed in his heart as the story of their struggle came to a close. Her legacy would live on in him, forever.